Thank you for your support. Slava Ukraini!
Can President Zelensky salvage a deal to end the war as Ukraine works with Washington to rewrite a Trump-based peace plan which ceded territory and power to Russia? Good evening. Even President Trump is saying don't believe it till you see it, but he did also say something good might be on the way to end the war in Ukraine. US and Ukrainian officials have been working to modify a 28-point peace plan leaked last week. The Russians liked it, perhaps because it looked a lot like a plan which could have been written by Russia for Russia, demanding Ukraine cede territory, reduce their military and are permanently banned from NATO. In a joint statement today, Washington and Kyiv said they have now drafted a refined peace proposal, but early reaction from Moscow is not encouraging.
And good evening from Leeds. Also on the programme tonight.
Chaotic.
Chaos and mayhem.
It's ridiculous, isn't it? Horrendous.
Uncertainty doesn't help business.
Business leaders give their verdict on the very leaky build-up to Rachel Reeves' budget. 2 days before the Chancellor is set to lay out what's been billed as a smorgasbord of tax rises, opponents of fiscal buffets call for her to change course. The rubbish scandal of Oxfordshire, 40 foot high and going nowhere fast. Has the Environment Agency done enough? And how many more illegal mountains of trash are out there? And he once rivaled Bob Marley as reggae's biggest star. Pioneer of the genre, Jimmy Cliff, has died aged 81.
Now, Donald Trump has indicated that he believes big progress is being made in moves to end Russia's war in Ukraine. But Volodymyr Zelensky has said that the main problem with the original 28-point peace plan drawn up by the United States concerns the territory it would hand to Russia. It would include the land shown in red, already seized since the invasion in 2022, but also land in the Donbas region, which is still held by Ukraine and would become a demilitarized zone. Meanwhile, there's been no let-up in Russia's military action, with multiple people killed in attacks on a residential area in Kharkiv last night. Our Foreign Affairs correspondent, Porrick O'Brien, has the latest.
Before trying to assess the viability of a would-be peace deal today, counting the cost of war in Kharkiv last night. According to officials in Ukraine's second city, 4 people died as a result of these drone strikes, 13 injured, 8 homes, a school and power lines damaged. Earlier today on social media, Donald Trump dangled the possibility of a breakthrough on peace talks, but then added, "Don't believe it until you see it." And on that last point, at least, 67-year-old Alexander Voropev agrees.
We don't believe in peace negotiations, because while politicians sit at the negotiating table with a pen, we're hit by missiles and bombs. People die. A woman was killed today. Her remains were only just retrieved now.
Today, addressing the Swedish Parliament, Volodymyr Zelensky acknowledged some progress in talks over the weekend in Geneva, but his key message, Ukrainian sovereignty, is non-negotiable.
There is a lot of noise in the media, a lot of political pressure, and even greater responsibility for the decisions ahead. Putin wants legal recognition for what he has stolen, to break the principle of territorial integrity and sovereignty. And that's the main problem.
EU leaders, blindsided by the surprise US peace plan last week, are now asserting themselves. At a meeting in Angola today, walking that tightrope between not raining on Trump's diplomatic parade, but also holding the line on Ukraine.
Ukraine's territory and sovereignty must be respected. Only Ukraine, as a sovereign country, can make decisions regarding its armed forces. The choice of their destiny is in their own hands.
The initial US plan last week spoke about Ukraine reducing the size of its army and relinquishing its claim on the 20% of the country Russia has occupied. But the Europeans have a counter-proposal now on the table. It's reported that the European version rejects the idea of restricting NATO enlargement, for example. The language around security guarantees for Ukraine is more robust. And it allows a significantly larger Ukrainian army than the US version from earlier in the week. It's been a dizzying 7 days of diplomacy. The original 28-point peace plan was leaked last week, drafted in Miami by Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner in conversation with Putin ally Kirill Dmitriev. It was basically a Russian wish list. Enough sticking points for Ukraine might as well have been drafted on flypaper. A US Army delegation arrived in Kyiv on the 19th of November to discuss the plan with Zelensky. Donald Trump tells Fox News that Thanksgiving Day this Thursday would be a good time for the Ukrainians to accept the deadline. Then the pushback. Technical talks began in Geneva, involving the US, Ukraine and European partners. On the US side, Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, becomes much more involved. Which brings us to today's diplomatic tug-of-war between the US and European proposal. In the last few hours, the Kremlin spokesperson said Moscow hadn't yet received anything official by way of a counter-proposal. When they do, as things stand, the world may not be much closer to a ceasefire than we were this time last week.
Warwick O'Brien there. Well, we can speak now to the former Danish Prime Minister and former Secretary-General of NATO, Anders Fogh Rasmussen. Thanks very much for joining us. I mean, how alarming was it to see a plan which looks like it was largely formulated by Russia, adopted by the US and foisted on Ukraine?
It was indeed very alarming. It's important to understand the 28-point plan is not a peace plan. It is a capitulation document. It is a blueprint for Trump defeat and Putin win, and that's why it has to be changed fundamentally.
And who must be the architect of that change? Because you said recently that Europe must stop being a commentator and become an actor. At what point does Europe have to accept that Trump keeps circling back to Moscow's demands and really assert themselves?
I think it's high time that Europe takes the initiative and do not be preoccupied by the thinking in the White House. Europe must step forward robustly and play hard power politics, which means give robust security guarantees to Ukraine, backed up by troop presence in Ukraine, and secondly, unlock frozen Russian assets for Ukraine.
But that troop presence that you talk about in Ukraine, how does that work?
Well, a European troop presence in Ukraine should not be on the front line. The front line will still be the Ukrainian army. But behind the lines, Europe could and should deploy troops to defend population centers, civilian infrastructure, etc. My estimate would be that we would need 20,000 European troops. We could start with a smaller figure, but end goal should be 20,000. In addition to that, we will need 150 combat aircraft, and we should establish an air shield to protect key cities in Ukraine.
But can this be done without some form of help or backing from the US? Would Europe have enough troops to do that?
We do have enough assets to do that, but obviously the deterrent effect would be much stronger if the US would back up such a European reassurance force by intelligence sharing, space surveillance, aircraft, transport, etc. So that would clearly be the goal, to get an American backup. But my point would be that even in the case that the US will not step up, the Europeans must do so.
I mean, given the original peace plan so clearly reflecting Russian demands, Are any US security guarantees worth anything?
Yes, but only if they are backed up by a concrete troop presence. The fact is that Putin doesn't care about paper guarantees. It's only guarantees backed up by a concrete military presence that he will respect. So time has come for Europe to change statements to soldiers.
I mean, you've been talking about that for quite a while. Do you get any sense that Europe is ready to step up? You know, there's a delicate balance. We heard the Polish Prime Minister say no one wants to discourage the American president from having the United States on our side in this process. They're nervous still, aren't they?
Obviously, it is a balancing act, and I appreciate all the efforts from the American side to push for initiating a peace process. But we in Europe, we must do our own work. I find it quite embarrassing that the Europeans are begging and asking for a seat at the table. We should have a seat at the table because we're indispensable. And the way to make yourself indispensable would be to bring something to the table. And that should be concrete security guarantees for Ukraine.
Anders Fogh Rasmussen, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you. Now, Labour and the Conservatives have been trading blows at today's CBI conference. The Business Secretary said the Tories had left the government with a growth emergency, while Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch promised she would scrap Labour's new bill for workers' rights. Business leaders were mainly keen to hear if they would face fresh taxes in this week's budget. Our economics correspondent, Helia Ebrahimi, reports.
A call to arms from British business. If you want growth, change course now. Thus came the message to the Chancellor from a grumpy set of company bosses just 48 hours ahead of the budget.
I could describe it in one word.
Go on.
Chaotic.
I think it's a Chancellor that presides over chaos and mayhem.
Considerable uncertainty, which has dampened business confidence.
It's ridiculous, isn't it?
What business wants is stability, policy stability.
Horrendous, because there's been so many leaks. It's enabled instability, which is the worst thing for all businesses.
Uncertainty doesn't help business.
Come up with 3 words to describe the last year.
Could do better.
A defining moment for the British economy, and the political parties were outselling their wares. A bid from the government on energy costs, by the opposition about employment rights, and for the first time at the CBI, by Reform, talking about welfare and immigration. But first up, the Business Secretary, trying to mollify companies. You say you're in listening mode when it comes to energy prices or the cost of capital, but are you listening when it comes to taxation?
Of course we're listening, of course. And I think you'll see in the course of this government that we have heard from business that they wanted action on energy prices. We're taking that action. We've heard that they wanted action on planning reform. We've taken that action. We understand there are still some challenges in the system. We can't solve all of them in 1 year. But believe me, we are striving to get the fundamental economic growth into our economy, because that is the only way that we will move out of the growth emergency that we inherited from the previous government.
A key flank of Labour's policies are about boosting employment, but the Bank of England and even the Office for National Statistics say that employment is now falling. Do you recognise, though, that businesses feel that they were blindsided by a £26 billion tax bill last year, and that has meant that they're not hiring people, they're not investing?
Our economy has added 330,000 new jobs into the British economy in the course of this government. So people are hiring. We understand that there is...
Data, I'm sorry, Secretary of State, the data shows that people have stopped hiring, it's falling off. That is not what the data shows.
We have now reached record levels of employment in the country. We understand that it is granular. We understand there is more business, there is more that needs to be done. The fundamental issue here is that we have a lack of growth in the economy from the inheritance.
The woman who used to have Kyle's job is now leader of the opposition and is set against the government's plans to push through the current employment rights bill.
we will repeal all of the anti-growth, anti-business measures in the Employment Rights Bill.
And has the government changed its position? The Secretary of State today was saying that he's launching 26 consultations on the subject.
I mean, just listen to that. Who on earth thinks that 26 consultations is a way to solve a problem? They should just get rid of this nonsense bill. Nobody's interested in having to fill out 26 consultations. Businesses are saying that there's too much red tape, and the business secretary's answer is that, well, I'll give you 26 consultations for you to fill out, and that will make things better. It's ludicrous.
And lots of companies here are very frustrated about the tax rises that they've seen in the Employment Rights Bill. But they're quite keen on what Labour is saying when it comes to investing in energy and on planning. Would you do the same? Would they get the same from you?
Well, they're keen on what Labour is saying. They're not keen on what Labour is doing.
But the CBI need Labour on side. Are you any the wiser on the Employment Rights Bill? Because does 26 consultations, does that mean there's concessions that the government are willing to nod to?
Well, look, consultation is fine, but it has to lead to meaningful change. And for that, you really need to have businesses and union leaders in the room clearly building out a consensus. There's no doubt that the business leaders I speak to are worried about what we call the Groundhog Day budget. So I think business last year were asked to shoulder a huge amount of a burden in terms of a higher increase in tax on business. And we're seeing the impact of that in slower growth.
Rachel Reeves needs to walk back some of the gloom in the business community if she's going to deliver the kind of growth that will help make people forget the tough choices of the budget.
Well, for more on the budget, Krishnan has been debating possible policies and polarised politics with the Greens leader Zach Polansky, Labour's Rosie Writing, and George Osborne's former advisor Rupert Harrison. For the latest episode of The Forecast, you can watch it on our YouTube channel. It's also on Spotify and wherever you get your podcasts.
To be honest, Zach, it is dangerous that you go on social media, you say, if you tax the wealthy, if you have this tax on assets, it'll make everyone's life better. And it's not true. It's offering people false hope. It's leading them down a garden path that you cannot deliver on.
Nigel Farage says, jump. Starmer says, how high? And you are handing this country on a plate to Nigel Farage. So I won't take the idea that me on social media offering people hope and saying that if we redistributed wealth and power,
false hope.
It's not false hope. If we redistribute wealth and power around this country, everyone will be better.
Now, footage has been released of Palestine Action activists carrying out an alleged attack at a Bristol factory owned by an Israel-based defence firm. The video has been shown at the trial of 6 activists who are accused of carrying out an attack at Elbit Systems after allegedly breaking into the factory in August last year, carrying sledgehammers. Well, Amelia Jen has the story and is with us now. Amelia.
Well, today we heard from some of the officers who were called out to that Elbit Systems factory in Bristol last August at around 3:30 a.m, including Police Sergeant Kate Evans, whose back was fractured by its alleged Samuel Corner, one of the 6 defendants on trial at Woolwich Crown Court. Now, jurors were shown videos released by police today, many of them from body-worn cameras and CCTV, and a warning that they're quite distressing. They appear to show some of what happened that night, the prosecution alleging the 6 defendants crashed into the warehouse in a retired police van, wearing red jumpsuits and carrying sledgehammers. The jury was also shown several different videos of the moment that Mr. Corner is alleged to have brought the sledgehammer down onto Police Sergeant Evans' back. It's a chaotic scene with red paint on the floor. This video showing one of the defendants being arrested in a struggle before capturing the moment Corner is alleged to have hit Evans as she knelt on the floor trying to arrest another member of the group before being tasered. Evans told the court that just before that moment she'd looked up at her colleague who had a shocked look on his face and that she then felt a pain in her back. She said that she was scared it had been shattered and that she struggled to get back up, scooting around on her backside instead to try and assist her colleagues and to help Samuel Corner, who, having been arrested, was complaining that his handcuffs were too tight. Now, she said that as she was doing that, he told her she was complicit in genocide. The court heard more than a year later she's still on restricted duties because of the injury sustained that night, and that she had to take 3 months off work after an X-ray showed a lumbar spine fracture. Samuel Corner's been accused of and denies GBH with intent over that incident you've just seen, as well as being charged with aggravated burglary, criminal damage and violent disorder. The other 5 defendants, Charlotte Head, Leona Cameo, Fatima Rajwani, Zoe Rogers and Jordan Devlin, have been accused of aggravated burglary, criminal damage and violent disorder. We heard all 6 were members of Palestine Action, that they they were opposed to actions of the Israeli government and military in Gaza and the West Bank, and that's why they had targeted Elbit Systems, because it's a UK subsidiary of an Israeli arms firm. All plead not guilty, with 4 of them saying in written statements that they hadn't intended anyone to come to harm that night. The prosecution alleges that, on the contrary, this is a plan made in advance, that they knew their role was to smash up and keep smashing up property until they were forced to stop, and if that meant using force, so be it. The trial continues and is expected to conclude in January.
Thank you, Amelia. The chairman of the BBC, Samir Shah, has apologised to licence fee payers for mistakes the corporation made, which have led to President Trump threatening to sue it for billions of dollars and resulted in the resignation of the Director General and Head of News. Mr. Shah and other BBC executives have just appeared at a Commons committee to explain how the BBC was plunged into such a crisis. The row centres on a BBC documentary which edited together parts of a speech made by President Trump in January 2021. Our political editor, Gary Gibbon, reports.
It shows the BBC is fake news. Of course, you and I knew that for a long time.
A scandal that stirred a president and led to 2 top BBC resignations. One edit, 2 Trump speech quotes, actually separated by nearly an hour, at its heart.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and we fight. We fight like hell.
Order, order.
Having lost his top employee and a very senior manager, the chairman signalled he thought the head of news was right to go, but not the Director General.
Did you try and stop him from resigning?
I did indeed, and I spent a great deal of time. I do not think the Director General should have resigned.
He was although his board first heard about the Panorama edit in January, formally discussed it in May, nothing about it until a week after the Telegraph leaked it.
Then why was there no apology when David Grossman first brought that to your attention?
I think that's a very fair question, and I'm back. I think we should have made the decision earlier, I think in May.
Watching Robbie Gibb on screen there.
I think you got your timeline wrong. That particular statement happened after I had left.
News channels don't usually go live to a BBC board members select committee, but Sir Robbie Gibb was Theresa May's number 10 communications chief, a lifelong Tory, labelled by some commentators as the man who used his position at the BBC to commission critical internal reports and engineer a right-wing coup.
The idea that somehow I'm not even sure what the charge is, to be honest, and basically other than to say it's complete nonsense.
Caroline?
Yes, I certainly wouldn't have characterised anything I saw in the last couple of weeks as being a board coup.
Or any kind of orchestrated board level?
No, endless debate.
Okay.
The board members denied those disagreements over the Panorama programme amounted to chaos, but did acknowledge a row with Deborah Turness over how serious a mistake had been made.
There was a continuing and sharp difference of opinion between certainly the chairman and me and some others on the board with the director of news. The news continued to maintain that actually the impression given, despite the edit, was correct, because the gist of the speech by Trump had, for example, the use of the word fight 15 times and only talked about peace once. And they felt that the edit was justified, but it should have been a more transparent edit. We felt that the edit had led to a more profound problem.
Former Rupert Murdoch employee who is reportedly a friend of Robbie Gibb.
Led by donkeys projected an image onto Broadcasting House of the man whose complaint to the board triggered this crisis. Michael Prescott said he hadn't leaked the letter, wasn't a right-winger, and disagreed with President Trump on just about everything, including whether he was entitled to multi-billion-dollar damages.
Do you agree that Donald Trump's reputation has been tarnished by this documentary?
Probably not.
You don't agree with him? Thank you.
The BBC chairman said he intended to stay in post and steer the corporation to calmer waters. He may have been helped in that by a relatively gentle select committee interrogation.
Well, the BBC isn't the only target in President Donald Trump's sights. His Department of War has announced it's reviewing allegations of misconduct against Senator Mark Kelly. That's after he, along with 5 other Democratic Party senators, released a video telling members of the US military that they could refuse to carry out unlawful orders. There's even a threat to recall the former naval officer to active service so he could be court-martialed. Well, Kate Fisher is outside the White House for us tonight. Kate.
Well, this is the latest example of President Trump attacking his perceived political enemies. Captain Mark Kelly is a former US Navy fighter pilot, a former astronaut and a sitting Democratic senator. And he's also really angered Donald Trump, being one of 6 members of Congress, all former military or intelligence officers, who put out a video calling on active military not to obey orders if they were unlawful. Here's a look.
This administration is pitting our uniformed military
and intelligence community professionals
against American citizens. Like us, you all swore an oath
to protect and defend this Constitution.
Right now, the threats to our Constitution aren't just coming from abroad,
but from right here at home. Our laws are clear. You can refuse illegal orders.
You can refuse illegal orders.
You must.
Well, Donald Trump responded to this on Truth Social, calling it seditious behavior and saying it was punishable by death. And now the Pentagon's saying it's received information and it's going to investigate these allegations. Quite an extraordinary move from the Pentagon, given that it's normally trying to show itself to be apolitical, at least until this second Trump term. Mark Kelly has also responded now on X, saying that if this is a way of trying to intimidate him and his colleagues, it will not work. You know, this is just the latest, as I say, example of Donald Trump pursuing these people he believes have wronged him.
Yeah, Kate, and a lot of people might remember the name James Comey. Big developments today in the case against him, right?
Absolutely. That's the former head of the FBI. And the case against him has now been dismissed by a judge, proving that not always does Donald Trump's attempts at legally going after his enemies, it doesn't always work. That case has been dismissed, as has the one against the New York Attorney General, Letitia James. However, today we also see the Trump administration officially designating Nicolas Maduro, the Venezuelan president, as a terrorist, showing that Donald Trump will still pursue potential enemies outside of the United States. That designation makes it much easier should the president decide to attack his foreign enemy militarily.
Thank you, Kate. Jackie.
Now, it's a mountain of rubbish which has been declared a critical incident by the Environment Agency. The illegal tip in Oxfordshire has built up over months and is threatening the nearby River Cherwell, which is a tributary of the Thames. The Environment Agency said it has mounted a major criminal investigation and has said it will try to ensure those responsible clear it up. But why did it get dumped in the first place? Our chief correspondent, Alex Thompson, has been to the site to find out.
It goes on and on and on. This is the new narcotics. This is organised crime. Not just household, but industrial waste, plastics, insulation panelling, batteries, oil cans. Insiders say the returns are higher, the risks lower than drug dealing or people smuggling. And this site in Oxfordshire, just one of many.
So here's how the grand scam works. Successive governments have increased the taxes and fees for legal dumping so much that for every truck you're looking at around £2,500. So think about it. If you dump illegally at a place like this, you're trousering £2,500 straight off, plus your profit margin on top. 4 trucks here a day, £10,000 a day, 70,000 a week, easy money, low risk.
Steam rises from whatever is decomposing deep down. The River Cherwell borders the site, posing an urgent pollution threat.
As soon as it rains, or just over time, as the materials in the dump break down, they're going to leach out all sorts of chemicals. We don't even know what's in there.
They wash out the chemicals.
Exactly, and those will go into the river. In the river, there is invertebrate, they're eaten by fish, amphibians, all sorts of life. We don't have time to wait for the person to be identified. We want to see the Environment Agency start to remove the rubbish, have it put away, treated properly, and for the river to be able to thrive again.
Where the dump meets the river, we filmed a boom put in by the Environment Agency in recent days. That will stop floating rubbish, but is utterly useless at preventing rainwater leaching toxins into the river system just a few metres away. We also discovered an area where the sheer weight of the dump has now burst the retaining fence, spilling right up against a land drain feeding into the river system. The crime gang chose their spot well for a summer operation, screened by trees on all sides. Hardly anyone noticed what was unfolding month after month. But local water bailiff Billy Burnell did notice.
Oh, they knew what they were doing, and you imagine the size of the outfit.
His photos show continuous dumping across the summer into autumn, and when he complained in September, he was amazed to learn the Environment Agency had known about it all for months.
I was astonished, really, because I would have thought that if they'd have known it that long, they would have at least had some solid leads as to who it was through surveillance and that sort of thing, or at least locked.
There was no surveillance.
I don't believe there was any surveillance. No, there certainly weren't any cameras.
The site is next to the A34, a busy road less than 20 minutes from the centre of Oxford. Satellite imagery shows just how quickly the site went from green fields to an enormous waste dump. In April last year, the fields are covered by grass, but within weeks the whole site is dug up and cleared and an excavator is visible. And months later, by the end of September, the entire stretch of land is filled with waste. So it's incontestable that the Environment Agency has failed to stop this happening for months, has failed to prosecute anyone, and has failed to clear up the mess.
So we're going to get that down here?
Lib Dem leader Ed Davey was here this morning.
Well, I'm genuinely shocked at the sheer scale of the crime that's been committed here and the damage to the local environment, the threat to the River Cherwell, as well as the wider environment. And it's not good enough for the Environment Agency to say, well, we're going to go after the people and try and prosecute them so they can pay for it, and then we'll clean it up. They need to clean it up now.
And yet, even grass is taking root here as nothing happens. In recent days, the government has declared this a critical incident. The Environment Agency says it is pursuing an urgent investigation. Bristol just this weekend, but it could be anywhere in the UK. The House of Lords recently reported that annually organised crime gangs dump enough rubbish to fill 35 Wembley stadiums every year. Clearly, the Environment Agency and the police can't cope, and they know of at least 6 other sites like the Oxfordshire one. Hodes Wood in Kent, a site of special scientific interest known for its ancient woodland plants and wildlife. The mess here, even larger than Oxfordshire. So far it's taken over 5 years to get to a clean-up. Illegal waste dumps like Hodes Wood, operated by crime gangs, stretch across England. There are 2 in Burnley in Lancashire, in Northwich in Cheshire, Sittingbourne in Kent, Camborne, Cornwall, and in Fakenham in Norfolk. Back here in Oxfordshire, we saw no sign of the Environment Agency here today. There's no hint of any prosecutions, and there is no sign of any clean-up anytime soon.
Well, in a statement, the Environment Agency said, quote, "It is following several lines of inquiry. Additional officers have been deployed both to manage the site and to progress the investigation, working closely with the local police." Now, insufficient justice, accountability or action. That was Baroness Casey's scathing assessment of the experiences of many who were groomed and abused as children. Tonight, in the latest of our reports on grooming, one survivor of appalling abuse meets the former detective who investigated her complaints against police officers, who she says left her in harm's way. This comes as the establishment of the government's National Grooming Inquiry remains in disarray. And a warning, this report from our North of England correspondent Claire Fallon contains distressing details.
I was about 13. It was very abusive. There was a lot of violence. There was a lot of coercion. Basically, they weren't going to investigate the allegation because they just felt like I was a woman scorned. But this was a 38-year-old man.
And you were 13?
Yes.
what had happened to them when they were children was horrific. And they wanted answers about why the police had done nothing to help.
And so began Operation Cardamom. It was meant to get to the truth about what was happening in Middlesbrough in the 1990s and why police who knew what was happening didn't act.
The police failed to protect you?
Yes.
Failed to investigate the crimes that were committed against you?
Yes.
We're calling her Susie and have changed her voice to protect her identity.
They were investigating if mistakes were made.
We've invited her here to talk to this former detective turned whistleblower who worked on the IOPC investigation into failings by police to protect Susie.
The investigation was dead in the water, really, from when we started.
Chris Owen worked for the Independent Office for Police Conduct on a contract after retiring as a police detective. He joined Operation Cardamom, investigating Cleveland police after complaints from Susie and 3 other survivors who'd been sexually groomed and abused as children.
The failings were horrendous.
And as they meet for the first time, Chris Owen shares his belief that the IOPC's investigation into failings by police was itself a failed investigation.
When I joined it, it was apparent that really nothing had been done for the previous 3 years. No material was being checked, nothing was being looked at. They were not contacting the survivors, where they should update the survivors and make sure that they understand what's going on. That meant that when I joined it with the lead investigator, we picked up the biggest mess I've ever seen in my life.
Some aspects of the IOPC investigation did need to go on hold until the end of criminal proceedings, which saw 2 of Susie's abusers being jailed in 2017. But then the outcome of the police complaints process took another 4 years, with this report setting out the IOPC's findings and also the alarming details of multiple occasions when police failed to protect Susie from her abusers.
You were threatened with a gun?
Yep.
And often it was happening in plain sight.
A man who was known to us with quite a big gun. It wasn't like a small shotgun, it was quite a big gun. We thought he was going to shoot us. We ran. We hid in, I don't even know where, but we hid in some flats. Called the police come. Nobody investigated it, nobody found out whether there was a gun, nobody...
Not even recorded as a crime?
It wasn't even recorded as a crime. You know, if that guy then pulls up to me the next day, do you think I'm not going to jump in his car and do what he says?
On another occasion, police asked Susie if she was a prostitute, arresting her for being drunk when she'd just escaped a man who'd been plying her with alcohol. And age 13, when she reported sexual abuse by a taxi driver in his 30s, police records show a detective thought it was consensual and described her allegations as the disclosure of a woman scorned. At around the same time, when she was 13 or 14, Susie says there was another man driving her around and taking her for sex, and that he was a serving police officer with a neighbouring force. The IOPC told her its investigation didn't find evidence that Cleveland police knew but didn't act. However, we now know that police officer was later jailed for sex offences. Overall, the IOPC concluded there were times when Cleveland police failed Susie. In the case of one Cleveland detective, the failings were found to be so serious they'd have faced the sack, except they'd already retired. The IOPC has told us the law at the time prevented disciplinary proceedings after the officer's retirement and that they have no legal power to prevent police retiring.
There was no redress, there was no saying how to put things right, there was nothing to say that this won't happen again.
Disciplinary action?
Nothing.
Cops being sacked?
Nothing.
Taken to a misconduct hearing?
No.
None at all?
Nothing. There was no kind of accountability. There is no one person, there's no entity that is responsible for the failings of upheld police complaints.
And she's not alone in those frustrations.
I'd apologise to you that we didn't get anywhere, but I tried my utter best. My personal view is they did fail. They've gave you a lot of waffle that leads to nowhere. And lessons are learned, which is a get out that you hear all the time of.
Tis. Nobody ever tells you what those lessons were.
According to the IOPC, their investigation was thorough, and in a statement they say,
"Our thoughts are with all survivors of abuse. It's vital their voices are heard. As we've experienced in other investigations, the passage of time posed significant challenges, including a lack of recorded information."
They added,
"We have been saying for some time that the arrangements for holding police to account need fundamental reform and have called for a wider review."
While Cleveland police have told us they wholeheartedly apologise to Susie, that the language and behaviour of the 90s don't reflect the force today, and their response to child sexual exploitation and abuse has drastically improved. However, earlier this year, Cleveland police was found to be inadequate at investigating child abuse. And so for Susie, 3 decades after she was failed as a child, and with the National Grooming Gangs inquiry ahead, albeit delayed, there remain urgent questions.
When you think about safeguarding, you think about the role of the police. If they aren't doing what they are there to do, then who is going to do that? And then if you look at then who investigates the police, if they aren't fit for purpose, where do we go? Where do we go if they're not fit for purpose?
Claire Fallon there. 2 peers are expected to be suspended from the House of Lords after the parliamentary watchdog ruled that they had broken lobbying rules. Richard Dannett, the former head of the British Army, and David Evans were filmed breaking the rules in undercover footage recorded by The Guardian newspaper. The pair were caught offering to arrange meetings with ministers and politicians to reporters posing as lobbyists. Lord Evans has had the Labour whip removed, while Lord Dannett remains a crossbench peer.
The controversial US-Israel-backed Gaza Humanitarian Foundation has confirmed it will permanently shut its operation inside the Gaza Strip. The group was set up in late May to distribute aid as an alternative to the United Nations model. More than 1,000 Palestinians seeking aid from GHF sites were reported to have been killed or injured by Israeli military forces who secured the route to those sites. The Israeli military says it only fired warning shots as a crowd-controlled measure or if its troops were in danger.
Northamptonshire Police Force has launched misconduct proceedings against 4 of its officers over their handling of events preceding the murder of 24-year-old Harshita Brella. Her body was found in the boot of a car in East London in November last year, 4 days after it's believed she was strangled in Corby. She had reported her husband Pankaj Lamba to police for domestic abuse. He's now thought to be in India after having fled the UK. Jane Death has this report.
Harshita Brella on her wedding day in India. Just months later, living in the UK, she would be asking police to protect her from her new husband. Harshita reported abuse by Pankaj Lamba to Northamptonshire Police. They arrested but didn't charge him, although there was an order he shouldn't contact her. Harshita was placed in a refuge, but her family says she felt scared and unsupported. 2.5 months later, her body was found in the boot of a car dumped in East London. She'd been strangled. Now an investigation by the Independent Office for Police Conduct has concluded 4 officers have serious questions to answer. The IOPC recommended 2 detective constables assigned Harshita's case should face gross misconduct proceedings, saying, "We believe a police disciplinary panel could find the officers didn't appropriately review the case, set investigative actions, seek supervisory advice, or keep Ms. Brella sufficiently updated." The police watchdog also said 2 senior officers, a sergeant and a chief inspector, should also face disciplinary hearings over their supervision of the domestic abuse investigation and the risk assessment for Harshita. Her family says Northamptonshire Police failed to protect her and have failed to catch Pankaj Lamba, who went on the run in India.
And now it's officially disclosed that it's a negligence of UK police. So now I proved right. And a year is passed. So it's too late. Still, Pankaj is living in India, freely living in India. So I don't feel it's a progress.
The force said as a result of the IOPC investigation, misconduct proceedings are now underway in relation to 4 Northamptonshire police officers. The murder investigation into Harshita's death is ongoing, and our thoughts remain with her family and friends as we continue to work hard to bring the offender for Harshita's murder to justice. With sightings of Pankaj Lamba in a city near Delhi, Harshita's sister says Northamptonshire Police needs to try harder to catch him and put him on trial.
And they need to be contact with the Indian police immediately. Where is Pankaj Raman to find him? I just want it.
To Harshita Brella's family, police disciplinary proceedings are of little consequence. It's her suspected killer they want to face justice.
Jane Deeth there. Now in the US, the Justice Department has renewed its request to unseal the Jeffrey Epstein sex trafficking grand jury materials. In a submission in a Manhattan court, the department asked that a judge issue a ruling allowing the materials to be released now, after Donald Trump signed an order authorising release of the files relating to the disgraced financier. After the break. We look back at the life of a reggae trailblazer, singer, songwriter and actor Jimmy Cliff, who has died aged 81. Welcome back. Jimmy Cliff was a singer and songwriter who made his name in Jamaica with hits like Many Rivers to Cross and You Can Get It If You Really Want. He gained global recognition when he wrote the theme song and starred in the film The Harder They Come, becoming one of reggae's biggest ever stars. Aisha Tull reports.
Didn't I tell you I was going to be famous one day?
A star was born. James Chambers, who hailed from the parish of St James in Jamaica. A name that was changed to Jimmy Cliff. Cliff, to symbolise the heights he intended on reaching. And that he did. After initial success on the island of Jamaica, the recognisable anthems he became known for found an audience in the UK. Wonderful World, Beautiful People reached number 6 in the charts in 1969, and that was despite the chilly reception he got in 1960s London. He once recalled a landlady who was racist towards him. She swiftly changed her mind once she saw him on Top of the Pops. Messages of equality, fairness and protest were a big part of his musical career.
Music can highlight awareness, and from that awareness people can take some kind of action to better the situation.
Jimmy Cliff was both an actor and a musician.
I'm looking for work. I can do anything, anything.
The 1972 cult classic The Harder They Come showed a grittier side to Jamaica, with Jimmy Cliff playing a young man trying to break into the country's corrupt music industry.
What's the meaning of this, sir?
I mean, you get $20 for the record.
$20, sir? That don't sound right.
For the generation of fans like producer Blacker Dread, the film meant everything.
We didn't used to see our own people on screens, especially all of our own people on screens. So I remember going 5 nights in a row. I actually went 7 nights. I couldn't get in the other 2 nights, but I got 5 nights in a row watching The Harder They Come. It was magnificent. I can always remember the first time I met him in Jamaica, and I couldn't believe I was actually standing on the same earth as this man.
When you think of Jimmy Cliff, what's the song that sticks out in your mind? What are the lyrics that stand out to you?
The harder they come, the harder they fall, one and all. Mr. Jimmy Cliff, salute you, my brother.
Many rivers to cross, but I can't
seem to find.
The iconic Many Rivers to Cross tapped into the pain and despair of having to push through the obstacles in your way. And so the song exemplifies Jimmy Cliff's own journey. And in the end, tributes paid today called him a true cultural giant whose music carried the heart of the nation to the world.
I should tell there now. That is all we have time for this evening. We're back at 7 tomorrow night. Until then, that's Channel 4 News. Good evening.
Whatever the weather. Channel 4 Weather, sponsored by Simply Safe Home Security.
Tonight, showers will continue to push into parts of eastern Scotland and England, with a few affecting West Wales and Cornwall. Elsewhere, variable amounts of cloud and clear spells, winds easing in the west and turning colder with the frost in the north. Tomorrow, after a chilly start, many places seeing a fine day with plenty of sunny spells. A few showers still persisting in the east and along Irish Sea coasts, but these gradually fading, winds turning lighter. Outbreaks of rain moving east on Wednesday after a frosty and bright start in eastern Scotland and northern England. Much milder and windier on Thursday with heavy rain at times. England remaining fine on Wednesday after a frosty start, but cloudier elsewhere and becoming damp in Wales and western England later. Mild and breezy on Thursday with rain at times.
Sunshine and showers. A British classic. Channel 4 Weather, sponsored by Simply Safe Home Security.